Right. So welcome everybody. It's 2 o'clock on September the 20th, and I'm really delighted to have our third webinar of this week on Cornell's Climate Smart Farming Program, Decision Tools and Practices. And we have here with us Allison Chatrchyan and Brian Belcher. And I'm really delighted that they have carved out some time from their intensely busy schedules to show us some really cool tools that I think would be really helpful. And a recording of this will be available, so you don't have to furiously write everything down. I'll give you a link at the end to where the recording will be, and you can expect that next week. So we're just going to cover a few housekeeping things before we dive into the content. And Allison, if you could just move the slide forward for me, please. All right. Just mentioned the recording. Okay, and the next slide. And okay, so we're using Zoom, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and we're using the Q&A feature during this. So we've set aside 4 or 5 times during this webinar where you can ask questions of the presenters. And so if you scroll your mouse over your screen, you should see a bar either at the bottom or at the top that gives you some different information, like you can mute, for example, yourself. But in the middle of that bar, and it may be at the top of your screen or the bottom, there's a little box that says Q&A. And if you click on there, you can ask questions. And then when we take a break from the presentation, we'll ask some questions. So please try not to use the chat feature because it's harder for us to keep track of. But if you can use the Q&A, that would be great. And then Nancy Casamano is very graciously monitoring those questions, and she'll pick out some that can be used at the breaks. And next slide, please.
Oops, hold on. Oh, I got carried away.
Great. So we're going to start with a question, and you'll see on your screen there are 2 questions that we have for you, and Allison also has another question, but we've got the polling feature here. So what is your background? Are you a farmer, researcher, extension person, home gardener, or other? And where are you located? Northeast, South, Midwest, or West? And I'm just going to leave this open for about a minute, and then I can show you the results at the end. And that's also helpful for Allison and Brian because they know the background of the people that we're presenting to. So I'll just be quiet for a moment while you check your answers. All right, I think everyone who's going to respond has had a chance to do so. And I'm going to share the results with you. So other is the highest category. So we should have, there's not an option in these polls for you to write in your answer, which would be really helpful. And most people are from the Northeast, and we have a smattering from the Midwest and the South. So great. So thank you for doing that. It helps us. And okay, and so I'd like to introduce Allison. Allison Chatrchyan work focuses at the interface between social, environmental, and agricultural systems. She works to facilitate interdisciplinary research and cooperative extension teams that are developing resources and tools for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Trained as a social scientist, her research focuses on assessing stakeholder beliefs and actions, climate change adaptation policies, and local climate action plans, and the effectiveness of climate change policies and governance mechanisms. And so I will turn it over to Allison, and she can introduce Brian, who is on her team.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm really happy to be here to share some new tools with you, and I'm also happy to be joined by my colleague Brian Belcher, and he's going to give you a little background on what his degrees are in and what he does for us here in the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences.
I have a bachelor's in atmospheric science from Cornell, and I get my master's from Texas A&M in meteorology. And I have extensive experience with applied climatology and IT work as well. In the last few years, I've been working with the Climate Smart Farming team here, developing these web tools.
Yay. All right, great. So we are like to do a lot of outreach talks in New York State and around the Northeast. And we always like to start the talks by getting people to think about the climate impacts or extreme weather events they are experiencing in their community or on their farm. We do a talk for a farm audience so that they can think about that and then think about what information they would need. So I don't think we have a poll here, but I'd like you to think about what are the climate impacts or extreme weather events you've experienced in your community, and then think about that as we talk about the resources and tools we're developing. So I want to start by providing you a little bit of climate context. And this is all data that we maintain here at Cornell University through the Northeast Regional Climate Center. They're a very strong partner based in the Earth and Atmospheric Science Department. And so what the data shows is that in the Northeastern United States, we see a warming trend of about 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 120 years. But we've also shown that much of this warming has occurred in the last 30 years, and the increase is higher in that time. So, or not higher, but the warming is higher in the last 30 years. So 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit of that warming has occurred since 1985. There's similar data or graphs available to show other parts of the United States and around the globe. We also see an increase in precipitation, and this would not be the same in many other parts of the country. But in the Northeast, we are very lucky to have a wealth of water resources. So we have seen an increase actually in the last 120 years of 4.9 inches. And that may not seem like a lot of water, but if you think about the drier conditions that other areas of the country or even the globe are experiencing, the fact that the Northeast has water and is expected to have water in the future is very, very important for farming communities, especially. We also see this trend. So we see an increase in precipitation overall, but the most interesting facet is how we are experiencing that increased precipitation. And we see that in the entire United States, except for Hawaii, there's been an increase in these very heavy rainfall events. So the chart here shows the one-day very heavy precipitation events, the increase between 1958 to 2012. And the Northeastern United States has seen a 71% increase in these heavy events over that time. If you look at the map, that is the highest increase of any region in the United States. So what that means is that we are getting very, very heavy rainfall events, 2 inches or more in a 24-hour period, whereas in between those events, we see drier conditions. And with those heavy rainfall events, that can cause a lot of impacts. And I mentioned in between those events, there is a possibility of increased short-term drought. So the graphic on the left is, both of these are from the US Drought Monitor. If you're not familiar with this tool, it's an amazing tool. And you can, when you first go into the website, you'll see the entire United States, and then you can click into the Northeast and then into New York, actually. So the graph on the left, if you recall, in 2016, we had a pretty serious, significant drought in New York. So this is showing the data for August 16th. But as of July 24th this year, there was still some considerable abnormally dry conditions in much of the Northeast and New York State. So we are getting more heavy rainfall events in these big events, and then in between, with higher temperatures, more evaporation, it's likely to be drier. We also see an increase in the frost-free season length of about 10 days in the Northeast. And what that means is, with all these climate impacts, climate changes, we have both challenges, but also some opportunities. And it's very important to think about the opportunities. We have longer, warmer growing seasons. We do have adequate water in the Northeast. And so how can we take advantage of our opportunities while managing these climate challenges? So our organization, the Cornell Institute for Climate Smart Solutions, we're now in our 5th year, hard to believe, but really our mission is working towards resilient and sustainable agricultural, ecological, and social systems in the face of this changing climate that we're experiencing. We launched the Climate Smart Farming Program and the tools that we're going to talk about in 2015, and we have one of the only climate smart extension teams in the country. So our goals are really 3, and they mirror the climate smart agriculture goals used globally by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So it's really increasing resiliency through adaptation practices, increasing energy efficiency and renewable energy to reduce emissions, and that's called mitigation, and then sustainably increasing productivity so that we can achieve food security. And so our goal really in this program has been to make sure that farmers and decision makers have accurate information so that they can make the most informed decisions they can. And we really feel that it's important to provide region-specific information. So the idea of this slide is just to point out that our region is very, very different in terms of the types of crops and the landscapes in the Northeast versus the Midwest or even the Southeast. If you're participating on the call from another region, there are 2 other really good websites that provide similar decision tools. So if you're in Florida or the Southeastern United States, a site, very useful site is called AgroClimate. In the Midwest, it's called Useful to Usable Tools. And here in the Northeast, Brian and I are going to talk about our tools. So on the Climate Smart Farming website, we are basically providing, right up at the top, we get you for farmers or decision makers or gardeners, we're giving you the climate context of how the climate is changing. And then right off the bat, there are tools that you can use. We're getting about 1,000 website hits a month, which is amazing. We provide links to our extensions, programs, and videos and resources. So I think at this point, I think I'll point out our team, and then at some point, Jonna, we may go live to show you the tools live.
While you switch over from that, there's a question that's come in. So, but okay. I'd love to hear about your team. So it looks like they're spread over the state.
They are spread over the state. I can pull it up live on the site. Can everyone see that well?
Yes.
Let me get a little bigger. Okay. I'll pull it down. Okay, so when you first come into the site, there is some information about the different types of climate impacts that farmers tell us are the most serious in the Northeast. So really the storyline here is how is the changing climate affecting your farm? And we'll talk about a new tool at the end of the webinar that is going to be really providing more specific information, not just a storyline. And then scrolling down here, we have links to our extension team in New York State. Unfortunately for now, this is only available in New York. We do apply for grants, and we would love to expand extension programming, but we do also work very closely with the USDA Climate Hub, and there are extension specialists in every state working on these issues. We provide resources and best management practices, links to programs. So if a farmer understands that, yes, they are getting a lot of erosion and runoff due to heavy rainfall events, and they understand their climate factors more carefully from the tools, then we can tell them, well, now that you know that, what can you do about these impacts? And this is where the resources come into play. And then there's multimedia, a lot of interesting videos that talk about, from a farmer's perspective, what are they seeing?
And I can vouch for that because I actually watched some of those videos and they're really interesting. So definitely check those out. And before we go into looking live at some of the tools, Nancy, do we have any questions that have come in?
We have one question, and it's about the short-term drought slide that you showed. Short-term drought could sound not so terrible. Can you talk about how long it lasted and what the impacts were?
How long did it last? I mean, I think we try to be very careful when we use the term drought. There is a lot of work at Cornell. Actually, Dr. Toby is looking at long-term drought and the projections for decadal drought, actually in the southeastern United States. When we're talking about drought in the Northeast, we are very lucky in the Northeast that we don't typically see these droughts like in California that last many, many years. So we're talking about during the growing season, when there's more higher temperatures, plants are taking up the water, trees are taking up the water, and we see a period where there's lack of rainfall, that it might be a week or a month or a season that's more dry. And you can track these on a daily basis at the US Drought Monitor link that I provided. Did you want to add anything to that?
Sounds great. Yeah, the US Drought link, I think they update once a week. The tool that we have on is updated once a month, and it also, the tool we have will also, we'll show you in a little while, we'll be showing forecasts out to 3 months. Over the next few months, we're looking at getting that up. The developers are still working on those tools.
And I can actually chime in because I was at, I live in the epicenter of where that 2016 short term was, and I do remember that it didn't rain through early May until August. There was not a drop of rain, so it was like right when there was planting going on, and yeah, so to answer that person's question, how long that was. Oh, great. All right, so lovely. So I know that you've got some wonderful tools to show us. So do you want to dive in and start with your CSF tools?
Sure. I want to pull them up and then.
Yeah, we can bring up. There's our main tools page. You want to go back to the?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually a main tools page that has all of the tools. The ones at the top were developed here with our Climate Smart Farming program, and then we have a bunch of other tools, very useful tools that are available that were developed outside of Cornell. And so when we click on one of the tools, here's our growing degree day calculator. Now each of our tools has a location picker where you can select your location. Currently, these tools are for the Northeast.
Does someone want to give us a location, Jonna, an address?
I could. How about Main Street in Trumansburg?
Okay. So I can type that in for Brian.
Here, let's make that active. There we go.
Okay. So when I talk to audiences about the tools, I just love explaining that they are usable anywhere in the Northeastern United States. And I think that's just phenomenal. So I hit enter, and then we need to hit save and select, and it's going to bring us right to that location. And then Brian, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, so by default, it'll give you the start of the season as January 1st. But of course, you can here pick a specific planting date. Here we'll just pick May 15. It'll recalculate everything and do the accumulations from that planting date. Currently, we only have a couple of growing degree thresholds, base 50 and the 66 or 8650 method for corn. But we have more development in the works for this tool, which hopefully over the next month or two we'll be making live, and it'll have all growing degree day thresholds, from 32 up through 50, and different methods to use, and a couple more bells and whistles going on there. Also, we're late in the season now, but if you're early in the season, you can click on Season Outlook, and you can actually see beyond where the current day and current forecast, the 7-day forecast is the red dots. And beyond that, we can use climatology to see what we could expect for the rest of the season from that point on.
Wonderful. Sorry. That's okay. And so it looks like you have your 15-year average is a blue line, and the 30-year normal is the is what you need.
Those reference lines, we're going to keep the 15-year average will always be the most recent 15 years. And the range, the gray range there you see is the minimum and maximum that we've seen for a period of record.
So so that's showing us is that we're at the top of the range for the 30-year normal right now. So, okay.
So what do people think that this graph is indicating for this year? It's September 20th, so that's showing where we are right now. And then the red information is the 5-day forecast, 6-day forecast.
Yep.
And so if you compare where we are this year to where the period of record is, this is a great educational tool as well as a useful tool for farmers and gardeners to determine when pests might emerge. But it's just a great educational tool to show that for this season, the climate is changing. We are accumulating growing degree days much faster than the period of record, than the last 30 years and the 15-year average. So there's also information down here at the bottom to explain how to use the tool, and that's very helpful. If you're not familiar with using a growing degree day calculator, this will definitely help you with that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So should we move on to the water deficit calculator, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And if people who are watching have questions as we move along, feel free to just put them in the Q&A box.
Or if someone wants to give us an address.
Yes, I was going to say, or in the chat feature, you could put in an address that we could use. So for now, we could use a local one, but yeah, feel free to do that. Just type it in the chat, and we can use it later. So, okay.
So this is showing an address. I did an event 2 weeks ago, a climate smart farming meeting on a farm in Deansboro, New York, in central New York, Oneida County. And so this is showing the water deficit situation there. So do you want to explain what?
Yeah. The user interface will be similar for all of these tools, where you'll see up in the upper left-hand corner, the place where you can pick your location, like we saw before. This particular tool has multiple options that are local to a farm, where they can select the soil water capacity, high, medium, or low, the crop type, and there's a little info button here that will tell you what's within that group of different crop types. And then also planting, selecting the planting date. And we have a feature here where you can put in your last irrigation. If you follow an irrigation schedule, you can put in your last irrigation date. Let me pick July here, and it'll put that on our chart. And we assume the irrigation that you'd be irrigating up to the field capacity. We don't have a feature in here right now to put a specific amount in. So whenever an irrigation date is selected, it assumes it goes back up to the field capacity, and then starts doing calculations for our model beyond that. This also has a 30-day outlook, so we'll be able to look over the next 30 days what the probabilities are of reaching different water deficit levels.
And is that assuming that you irrigated?
That is assuming you irrigated. Yep, everything is recalculated based on what you selected.
So can you take that irrigation out? So what we know for New York State, at least, is that many field crops grower obviously can't irrigate. Many vegetable growers would be irrigating. But as you talk with farmers about the future, irrigation might need to be an option to the extent possible. And so what are the little dots in the different areas here, Brian?
And so we've got in the red area, the yellow area there is where there's no plant stress yet occurring.
Okay.
And then just below that,
Right here.
and I don't see the text in there, but usually that's where plant stress starts to occur. And then below that bottom line, near the bottom, is where severe plant stress occurred in the red area. And so we've seen where this year, as conditions dried out towards the end of June, July, and beginning of July, we start reaching that stress threshold. And certainly before that, we would do some irrigation. And so if we had a system in place, there's certain places that by looking at this chart, you'd be able to tell the best time to do the irrigation.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Wonderful. And we did have someone put in the chat feature an address. So for our next tool, we could use that. So
we're going to show you the apple freeze risk tool.
Okay.
And you want to tell us the address?
Sure. It's Main Street in Exton, Exton, Pennsylvania. And do you need the zip code?
What's the town?
Exton, Exton.
Zip code?
19341.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, so these, we have a couple of freeze risk tools for apple and for grape. And again, like we just showed you, pick the specific location. The date of interest will just show when during the season, a 30-day period. And we can also show a season to date. And we just started, these tools just became active for this, for 2018 and 2019 starting this month. And so the season to date is currently quite short. But one thing we can do with these tools also is to go to previous years. If we go to 2016, we can see the
wow, how cool.
The entire season to date. And
wow,
that orange line at the bottom is our damaged temperatures. And the blue line is the minimum temperatures. And you'll see where the minimum temperatures cross that threshold is where we would expect, in this case, 50% damage to the buds to occur.
So it looks like in March 2017, there could have been 2 days there that were a freeze risk for Empire apples.
And would that also change if you change the variety? So with Macintosh, they would have different probabilities of freezing.
Yeah, there's a different model that's run for each variety. And let's focus in. If we want to focus in on that particular area, that's March 13, 14. So let me go to the.
Next year. Oh.
And here's where we see it, focusing in on where it's specifically crossing. And what we would see during a regular growing during the current growing season is a forecast out 6 to 7 days, where we would be able to see when it starts approaching that line and when a producer would want to start to think about taking some sort of action.
So are there any questions on these tools? We know that with the changing climate, that the risk for these freeze events could increase. And it's not because the freeze risk is changing in itself. It's just that we're seeing warmer winters. And so the grape buds or the apple buds may actually come out of dormancy. And then what you might have happened is you get what would normally be a normal colder snap later in the spring, but because there's been a warmer winter, you have more risk. And so this is trying to give farmers at least a little bit of forecast of when that might happen. Or if you looked at the data at your farm over the past several years and you saw, well, this risk happened 3 out of 4 years, I might want to invest in some wind structures or some other practices that I could manage the risk better going forward.
Great, thank you. And Nancy, do we have any questions that have come up?
We have one question, and it is, why is 50% damage used?
We have, our model will calculate 10% damage temperature, 50% damage temperature, and 90% damage temperature. On the charts, as you mouse over, you're able to see those values. On the chart itself, we just chose to do the 50% damage temperature. It gets kind of very cluttered on the chart with a lot of lines going on, but we do give that reference for different thresholds.
All right, thank you.
Yana, did you want to take a break or ask some more questions, or do you want us to keep going?
Let's keep going because somebody else just put in there an address that we can use. So let's do that for the next tool. That might be, and feel free to put more questions in if you have them and say as we come up. So
okay,
all right.
So we wanted to show you the cover crop planting scheduler, which was really developed at the request of cooperative extension educators in Northern New York and farmers who really wanted some more accurate information on when they would have to plant a cover crop to get it established by the end of the season. And this is challenging because we know from farmers that each season is different and there's more increasing variability season to season and increasing things that come up. So you might have a really, really wet spring and a farmer might be unable to get their equipment into the field, and so everything gets delayed. And so then they need to make the calculation of, can they get a cover crop established before the end of the season to be economical? So do you want to tell me the address?
Absolutely. It's 1631 State Highway 45. And the town is Mullica Hill, M-U-L-L-I-C-A Hill, New Jersey, 08062.
Did I get that right?
Mullica with a C, not a K.
Oh, it fixed it. Hey!
There you go.
What a nice tool.
Great. And thank you, Mary, for offering some addresses for us to play with. I appreciate it.
So right now there's 3 cover crops to choose from: buckwheat, mustard, and rye. We could add additional cover crops here. We just don't have the data right now to do that. But so if a farmer wanted to plant rye, this is showing the dates over different years. And up here is showing October through November 20th. And this is so nice because if you show October 9th or October 10th, there's about 100% probability if you planted on that date, planting date of October 11th, that you would be able to establish the crop.
Oh, cool.
And if you move it over by November 6th, you only have about a 20% chance of establishment.
Wow. Oh, that's really helpful. I can see where there is the sharp drop off around October 23rd. It just drops right down. So,
one of the interesting things about this tool also is that you're able to see the effects of a changing climate. Yeah. The black line there that we're highlighting is the recent 15-year average. And for most locations that we look at for this tool, it's usually shifted to the right from the other averages that we show. We show the other lines are 30-year averages and period record. And so it's showing a shift to a later date, the ability to plant later in the season and still have your crop established.
Yeah, I can see the really big gap there between October 16th and 23rd, where it's different from the 30-year normal. You can really see that impact. So this is really helpful, I can see. So. And actually a question came in, which might be a good point to ask right now, which is, are you getting any reactions from farmers on these tools yet? Have people been starting to use them and giving you some feedback?
Yeah, we have recent user data. So do you remember what?
Yeah, I think the Allison mentioned that we get about 1,000 hits per month on these tools, and the most popular one is by far the growing degree day calculator, where we get close to 500 hits per month on that. And whoops.
I know what it is though. So we are getting feedback because we are going out all the time to do talks. We did 2 twilight meetings. I think it's Cornell. Oh, maybe it's climate. Let me see in here. We are actively seeking input. Password is CSF. Okay, let me try that. So if you use these tools after this phone call or webinar and you want to provide us input, this is a great way to do this. This survey should be under every single tool, and it asks which tool you've used, how useful it was, and what you're really using it for. So we are starting to get input, and we're able to make changes to the tools based on what users are really thinking would be most important.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. So why don't I turn over to the Drought Atlas.
Okay. And we have another address. If you would let me know when you need another address, because we have another one come in.
Okay, this tool is a little bit different, and I'm definitely going to let Brian explain it.
This one, it shows monthly Palmer Drought Severity Index. And really the only input right now along the left-hand side would be the month and year, which is available back to 1950. And as you mouse over the map, currently the counties for New York, you can see a time series of what those indices were to present. And this is updated on the first of each month for the previous month. So this was updated beginning of September to show the August. And we will, in the future, be showing the counties for the rest of the Northeast. We just need to fix it, a couple problems there before we put those live. And also for this tool, the developers are working on forecasts for the Palmer Drought Severity Index for the next 3 months. And there's also going to be an additional tool, hopefully over the next couple months, which would show the same thing for the Caribbean.
And that's really unique, and extremely difficult modeling has gone into that tool development. But it's unique in that the drought monitor doesn't show a forecast, right? It just shows what's happening right now.
And also the drought monitor doesn't show the indices that are the wet indices, right? Just the dry indices.
Okay.
So this is a little bit different for that as well.
Okay.
So what does the PDSI, what is the gradient? What does the dark green mean, and what does the reddy brown indicate?
It would be the same as the drought monitor, where it's abnormally dry to severely dry.
Here, these colors here, you get darker, you're getting more dry, and then teal colors is getting more wet. Okay.
So what that's showing is over the, looks like Pennsylvania has been getting some big wet spots, and then it's been drier up towards Maine. Is that what it's showing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For this month.
Okay.
Yeah. So all these tools provide a context for understanding how the climate is changing and how a farmer might use this information to make informed decisions.
Right. And I could really see in the place where your cursor was resting before, you could really see the trend where there was a lot more drier weather, and then it had certainly become wetter. Yeah, there you go. You can see that where it's going back to 1950, where there's a lot more dry than there is wet. So, okay, wonderful. Thank you. I can see how this could be really useful in just. I'm also assuming it's probably validating for farmers too, when because it's what they're seeing in their farms. But then actually to see the data is helps them really recognize that there's long-term trends that they would need to respond to.
Yes, definitely. So before I turn to show you our last tool, which is really still in development and really exciting because it's brand new, I will point out, as Brian mentioned, that there are links here to other tools like the Drought Monitor. You can pull that up through that link. We're trying to provide a toolbox and a centering point to get to all these useful tools. There are these two tools that look at seasonal temperature outlook and seasonal precipitation outlook. If you've never used them before, this is probably the best available data at the moment, and these are updated. So this is providing a 3-month seasonal forecast. So right here, it's September 20th through December 31st. And for New York State or the Northeast, except for up here, it's looking like there will not be much drought projected for the next 3 months, correct? Same thing for the temperature forecast. So those are really, really useful. When we've talked to farmers and done talks, not many people know and are not, or just not using this information for their planting decisions or crop decisions. So I think if we get the word out and make these tools more accessible, people will start using them more. So I'm going to link to the last tool we wanted to show you, which is, right now it's called Climate Smart Farming, Climate Change in Your County. And if you have a more catchy name that you'd like to propose, we've had a lot of fun thinking about what we could call this. But we just launched this last week. So do you want to introduce it? This is really Brian's development. It's amazing, amazing work. And really this type of tool does not exist anywhere else that we know of in this format. So it's pretty exciting.
Great. I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, so what you see is a Northeast map and showing trends for different periods. We have a data set of observed data that goes back to 1950. And so we're showing here by default the trends that are seen from 1980 to 2013, which is when our data set that we're using ends. So the red is increasing, in this case, I have average temperature selected by default. The red is increasing temperatures, and the blues are decreasing temperatures over that period. And you can see how it's much more, the colors are much more dramatic as you click on the most recent period. So the trends are getting are sharper from a more recent period. On the left-hand side, the inputs, we have some derived temperature variables. This would be high temperature, high daily temperature, low daily temperature. And these are averages over annual periods. But also days with high above 90, and our signal for that is pretty mixed. But usually for the other temperature variables, it's quite clear that things are warming. The growing season length is something that we derived for this tool, and we have different thresholds whether you want to use light freezes or hard freezes to define your season length. And by default, it's selected as 32. And also the trends in growing degree days. And we have a list of commonly used bases for those. For the precipitation, we show total precipitation and heavy precipitation, or the number of days above a certain threshold, and the trends that we're seeing in that. So if we
And so the teal is, again, it's getting more wet.
more wet, yeah.
The darker teal is showing on that graphic for the period 1980 to 2013. The darkest teal would be an increase of higher than 1.12 inches of rain per decade increase. So then, do you want to click?
Yeah, if we click on,
pick a county.
so we could,
Can you type a county in, or you have to click on the map to choose a county?
yeah, currently we just have to choose a county, but I think we're going to be adding some options later on to either select county and states from drop-down menus or type them in.
Okay.
Currently, it's just through the map where we select it right now.
So this is a nice graph. We had a huge debate on our development team about how to accurately show the data. And so this is showing, it'll vary for each county in the Northeast. So this is showing annual average temperature in Warren County, New York. And Brian, there's the observed values are those black dots. And then the period 1950 to 2013, it'll tell you in the sentence above here what that trend is, what the data is. And then if you pick a spot, the year, hey, the year I was born, let's see. In Warren County, the observed value average temperature was 42.1 over the year. And that's warmer than the previous decades.
Well,
And how do you explain the trend lines?
and then the red lines are just the trends over those two periods that we showed on the map. And if the trend is statistically significant, we show those trends. Now there are places on the map. We have small places down in West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania sometimes, where we see different patterns. Where you try clicking on one of those.
Actually, one of the people who's on the call had suggested Chester County in Pennsylvania, which is in the southeast corner. I don't know if our geography is strong enough to be able to pick that out, but
Southeast?
Southeast, yeah.
We'll pick one close to there anyway.
Okay.
Lancaster County.
There you go. Lots of farms in Lancaster.
And so, yeah, for that particular county, we're seeing, over these periods, significant increases.
Great. And what about the growing season length and the growing degree days?
None for this county for growing season length, and then growing degree days. The annual values are significantly increasing as well.
So how about we show you, we've been thinking about how to show farmers the climate change projections in the future. And so we can show you that. Is that only available by county? Or
it's
in
available for each county.
But if you went back to the Northeast?
No, you can click on it right from within there.
How do you do that? Or you?
Well, only from the...
Okay, so go into a county.
Yeah,
Okay.
you have to go into a county first, and then we'll be able to show you the projections.
Okay, I'm gonna go to my county where I went to college, Maine, somewhere around there. Waldo, well, close enough, Waldo County, Maine. And then I'm gonna click on the box for climate projections, and it's loading them.
Yeah, so it may take a few seconds sometimes to load the projections. There's a lot of data.
Okay. Do you think if I loaded Madison County before it would be in there? Should I try it? Please, computer. Please give us the projections. Okay, I'm gonna give up on that and try Shenango, Cortland, Tompkins. Anyone on the call from Madison County? Where is it? No. Oh well, close enough. Actually, that one. Yay.
Yeah,
I think I've loaded this before. This is why.
Mhm.
So where I grew up in Hamilton, New York is in Madison County, right in the center of New York State. What is that showing us, Brian?
So the green bands, this is results from 32 independent climate models, which is showing projections out to the year 2100. And we have options to show those models run with a high emission scenario, which is higher greenhouse gas emissions throughout the entire century, and low emission scenario, which is when if greenhouse gas emissions increase to the year 2040 and then level off.
Is that globally? Global emissions?
Yeah, that's globally. Yep, so these are global models. And the green band shows the bottom of the green band is the lowest of those models. And
What's that?
Oh, we're getting feedback.
Oh, no.
And the top line, the highest of those models.
Okay.
The line in the middle is a weighted average of those models.
So all these little black dots here are actually observed data. So 2002 on out, 2013 here. This is is that growing degree day accumulation? Wow, I want to look at average temperature though. For Madison County in 2012, 2013, this is the average temperature over the year. And then we can see what the projections are by 2050. It's going to get a lot warmer. Unfortunately, probably the most realistic scenario for global emissions is this higher one. If it were the lower one, we're still going to see some warming, obviously less. So really anything all of us can do to reduce emissions by driving a more fuel efficient vehicle, using less plastic, turning off the lights in your home, using efficient lighting, renewable energy will help us all keep the temperature in our county on this lower emissions path and the warming. And we are also providing the precipitation projections as well.
So the high point and the low point in the green bar you said was for the estimates from the models, and how many models were included in that?
So there's 32 different models, and they're each independent of the other. And so that green band shows the range of those results from that suite of models.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've never really fully clicked through here. And so for Madison County, where I grew up, this is pretty shocking. This is days with highs above 90 degrees. And here in 2013, we only had 1.6 days above 90 degrees, but look at how that increases over time.
Wow.
So give us your feedback on this. We hope this tool is useful for not only farmers, but community leaders that are working with your town to be more climate smart, for gardeners, for policymakers.
Now, this is just in beta mode right now, so we're really looking for feedback to add things to it that people want to see.
Okay, great. I was going to say, well, there's certainly many people on the call now, and people will watch the recordings too. I realized, putting on a climate smart farming tools in September when everyone's out in the fields at harvest. But I am absolutely sure that people will be watching this, over the winter months too. So, and are there any other questions that for people who are watching this? This is actually really interesting. And what happens for Madison County with growing season length and the other option that was there? Let me go back to that.
Is it going to go back to that county? No. So let me just pick a different county. Let's see what's happening up here. Essex County, New York, northern New York. There's a lot of dairy farms. A lot of field crops are grown there. And so growing degree days, it's significantly an increase. That's what we have included the trend line there. And the projections, again, increasing trend. Growing season length. Oh, okay. And so that 2013 growing season length was 124 observed. And then this is more.
I can really see how this would be really useful for working with policymakers when you're making a case for making some change at the local level. So in my background, I used to do fundraising often for children's centers, and it made a huge difference when the Pew came out with models by county of data, lots of data for children, and because you could show what was exactly happening in your county and compare it to neighboring counties. And I can really see that this would be useful in that same way when you're putting together a case or a grant proposal for using for changing some policies, or also for IPM, with looking at different techniques and how it might be helpful. I can really see how this could be useful. So it's actually really neat that it's so granular that it goes down to the county level. I can see it's going to be very useful for people. And great. Oh, and you've taken us to the NIWA homepage, and there's something for me to add there too.
Great. So just before we end, we want to share with you that we work closely with NIWA. They are we call our sister site. The difference between the climate smart farming tools and the NIWA tools is that the data for the NIWA tools actually come from all these station data points. And so this is really useful if you live here and there's a lot of IPM specific tools and models. If you live up here in an area where there are not as many stations, you can use our tools like the growing degree day calculator, the water deficit calculator, cover crops to make some decisions. So we really see these as complementary. Our tools are looking at a longer time frame, and these are really very crop specific management decisions.
And just for folks who are watching, we actually did the same Toolbox webinar with NIWA a few years ago. And so there's a really good recording of the same thing of navigating you around what they offer and how to use them. And so there's a link to that actually in the PowerPoint that we put together. And so when you get a copy of that PowerPoint, you'll see. And so you could watch that. And there's a couple of things. Can we switch back to the PowerPoint? Is that possible, Allison?
Mm-hmm.
Great. And if we can go down to towards the end, there's a couple of things I'd like to cover. One is that's the NIWA Toolbox webinar link, and you can find that also on our website. That's the link on our website. And then there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. Is we have a find a colleague option. If you scroll forward, you should be able to find that. Go forward maybe 2 slides. There you go. Okay. So we have a feature on our website where you can put a profile of who you are and your interests and research interests, and find colleagues in the region who are also interested. So Allison could put hers up on climate change and IPM, and you can find other IPM specialists who are also interested in that. So it's great when you put the grant proposals or you want to find collaborators for projects. So I encourage people to put their profile up there. And if you can scroll forward, the archive of today's webinar is going to be at this link. It's not going to be today. It takes us a few days to edit it. So sometime next week. And you'll also get an email. Everyone who registered for this will get an email with the link for the webinar. And if you could scroll forward for me again. We have one more of these toolbox webinars coming up next week on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And John Tucker is going to be talking about pest management in no-till corn silage systems. And also we have Deb Lieber from Northeastern. She's going to be talking about their different funding programs, including funding options for farmers. And so for those of you who are interested and know farmers who might be interested, that will be a great webinar to come to. And then the last thing to point out is that we have a new RFA is available. It came out earlier this week, and our deadline is November 15th, which seems to have slopped off the slide, but November 15th is the deadline. And if you come to our website, you'll find that. And I know Allison has a slide with some links to her social media that you can follow. So find out more about how these tools are progressing. And I'm sure it's a great place to give feedback and let people, let them know how you're using them and what you're thinking. And I just want to end by saying deep gratitude and thank you, Allison and Brian, for walking us through this. And I know your time is valuable, and these are really wonderful tools. And so hopefully this has been a good explanation for people, and also the recording will be helpful for people going forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And with that, I will end the webinar and wish everybody a wonderful afternoon. We have fantastic weather here in Ithaca, so we're all feeling a little giddy from blue skies and sunshine. So, okay. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.